Hello, it's me, and I bring before you the Dayan Gem 5. What happened to Dayan Gem 4? Well, don't worry, we're going to get back to that, but I wanted to hit this one next. So what do you do when you're confronted with what appears to be a new puzzle that moves in strange and bizarre ways that just doesn't make sense? Well, what I like to do is correlate it with previous puzzles and see if there's similarities to this. Well, the good news with this puzzle and the technique that I use to solve this is to understand that this is actually another puzzle in disguise. Now, to those who've been watching and following the Dayan Gems, realize that much of these puzzles were puzzles in disguise. For instance, remember the Dayan Gem 3? Well, if you remember, although this handsome guy over here, this turns on the faces over here and the faces over here, and we actually effectively correlated that with the Dino Cube. Dino Cube meaning that this could be taken as a dino slice here. If I were to take this and I slice it down, you'd end up with this star formation. But this move is equivalent to this move over here. Bringing this back and bringing this back, which would mean this move is equivalent to this move. Bringing this back here and this back here. Basically, all of these could be equivalent to that. The main difference is that you also could turn on the face, which you can't do here. So he said it looks more like potentially this, the Super X, where you can do dino slices and face turning slices. But I basically showed that it can be reduced to a dino cube and solved as a dino cube. Well, keeping in that keeping in that tradition, this Dayan Gem 6 can be correlated with another kind of a corner turner, which is the Skewb. What I'm going to show, and the way that I'm going to solve this, is to show that this is very much almost exactly like a Skewb. A Skewb is a corner turner, which, unlike the dinos, has corners, for one thing, and when it turns, it bisects down the middle and carries the corners about its axis with it, along with the centers. Well, if I were to look at this and take a look at these large triangles here, or any of these triangles, I can move them exactly like a Skewb, assuming that this is the face, these are the centers here, and these are the corners. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the corners. So if I turn this, I'm turning this corner and I'm dragging these corners with it, along with these centers. So this move is equivalent to this move. It bisects down the side, so in that sense, it moves and looks exactly like a Skewb. Now, if I were to refine it even further, I would say that if I were to take a Skewb and take the corners and slice it down, chop it down, I'd end up with this. Same thing over here. This can be thought of as a Skewb corner 2. Here's a corner, drags this corner, and this corner. So really, you could mix this up exactly like a Skewb and solve it like a Skewb, except there's another extra bit of turning here. This is a Skewb slice over here, as you can see, but this puzzle also has a more shallow cut over here. So this makes it unlike the Skewb, but makes it more like another kind of a puzzle, which is the F Skewb. So to those who have this puzzle and have looked into it, realize this is almost exactly, pretty much exactly the same as this. This is an F Skewb. Now what we have is we have an area where we have a corner piece, so to speak, with a large triangle. That's equivalent to this. It moves like that. I turn this, that's equivalent to this turn over here. And that's the only turn that this can make. There's no shallow cuts with this. So this is equivalent to this. These pieces here that are paired up are equivalent to these pieces here that are paired up. It's a paired up center. So what's equivalent to the center over here, but they're actually paired up over here. So these large triangles represent the F Skewb portion, where this is a corner that can actually be reduced down. It has 3 components, just like this has 3 components. Ignoring this, this is the only part of this that's different. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at this F Skewb over here, you have this internal area here. Well, all this is that internal area, but brought out and given a sticker. So it actually participates in the solve. Otherwise, this doesn't participate. But I can move this portion of the corner, this portion of it, and this portion of it. So too, I can move this portion, and this portion. And the reason that I can do that is that in addition to having Skewb turns, with these corners, these smaller corners, I can also do Skewb turns, but I can also do a more shallow cut of dyno turns. Well, this represents these small corners, where just like this, I can do a Skewb turn, just like over here. But in addition to that, I can slice it even more shallow and do a dyno turn, just like this. So as you can see, this is turned exactly the same way. So this small triangle represents the more shallow area, the small triangle here of an F Skewb, where you can do a shallow dyno turn. In the middle here, this is your Skewb turn over here. And if you notice, everything is exactly correlative with this. You've got the triangle here, this is the corner. This is equivalent to half of the center. This is the other half over here, so too this is half of the center, this is the other half. This correlated with this. Moving along in here, this represents a corner portion of the dyno cut, which is here. This is two colors, this is two colors. Moving on here, this represents the center portion, this represents the corner portion. So everything is exact. There is an exact identity of this dyno portion and this dyno portion over here. So that's interesting. When you look at the Skewb portion, as shown, this is made up of 3 areas that can be reduced by doing dyno turns. So too with this, it can be reduced by doing dyno turns. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a solve of this puzzle exactly like the F Skewb. But here's the kick. The kicker is the fact that this is actually easier than an F Skewb, because these corners, these little corners, have specific orientations. And remember, there was a couple moments where I had to make sure they were oriented correctly. This does not have a specific orientation. It can be equivocal. And I don't run into problems with false equivocation. I can just put them in any side that I want. All the rest is the same, with the potential parities and all that fun stuff. So we're gonna do this. Now remember, with the F Skewb, I basically reduced it to a Skewb and solved it as a Skewb. The main difference with this is I reduced it to not so much a Skewb but a super Skewb, because the centers of this Skewb is pretty much like the center of this Skewb. It's one color, I can rotate it any way and you wouldn't know the difference. Same thing here, rotate it any way, you wouldn't know the difference. This, if this is the center, and I were, say, exchanging these centers, doing my down, down, up, up, actually if I were exchanging these over here, perhaps down, down, up, up. Notice these have specific orientations that have to happen. Down, up, and up. So with this center, yeah, I have 2 colors, but these colors are part of the center, which means it has a specific orientation. To do one down, down, up, up means I'd swap this. If I swap it again, this would be back, but it would be rotated, which doesn't matter with this puzzle. But if I swap this center with this center and rotate it back, these 2 would be swapped and it would make a difference. In that, it's kind of like a super Skewb and not just a Skewb. A super Skewb much the way this one is. This is the Skewb dodecahedron. Again, these are the centers, this is the centers. If I swap them out, if I were to swap this center for this center, down, down, up, up, if I do it twice, these will flip, but they'll be rotated. Other examples of super Skewbs, Skewb ultimate. Same kind of thing. I think it needs some lubrication, but down, down, up, up. These centers, rotation means something. And of course the golden egg, same thing, it's just a Skewb. The main difference when solving this is that normally when I would do one set of down, down, up, up to swap, I'd have to do 2 sets to swap and then bring it back and do it again so that I can rotate it back. That's the main difference with this one. So one difference is that this has no specific orientation, but I make up for that because the centers do have a specific orientation. So with that said, let's see if we can solve this like the F Skewb, which means we reduce it to a super Skewb and solve it as such. Now, the main issue with this method is perspective. The good news is when I solve this, I don't do it any different from the F Skewb. But the perspective can be confusing. Once you've got that, it's a very fun technique. It's a very fun solve. But make sure you really understand the correlation between this and the F Skewb, and I would refer you to the tutorial on that to really get that. But let's see exactly what we're dealing with. We described that this is the center. The center is made up of 2 components that need to eventually be reduced by using dyno cuts, just like this was. Just like this was. And the center also has 2 colors. in terms of the corner, this whole thing represents an entire reduced corner, which has a centerpiece, which is really derivative from the center, and then you've got these slices over here. This here only represents the single corner piece. So this whole side does not represent one corner, only this triangle here. Every other aspect, the center, the corners here, all have to be reduced to be called centers and corners. This one is non-reducible, and it's only this part of this face that's the corner. All the rest of these parts are derivative of other parts. So this over here is derivative of this center here. This over here is derivative of this corner over here. So when scrambling it as a Skewb, this is going to be the only one that matters. All the rest of these can seem completely scrambled, but they may not be, because they may be part of a reduced center or a reduced area over here. So if I go like, say, this is still in the Skewb form. Even though this face, this side, doesn't appear to be solved, this triangle, this corner is reduced. All the other corners are still reduced. Oops, here, here, and here are reduced. So no matter how I turn it here, I've not taken myself out of the reduced side, because I've not scrambled these. So that is the basic concept. Now bear in mind, resting like this, it would rest like this. With this is the top with the centers over here, corner, corner with its three components, and corner. These aren't part of this corner, they're part of other things. Center, corner, center, corner, center, corner. Okay, I think I made my point. Now, what I would encourage you to do, just to get perspective, is scramble it first as a Skewb, and then solve it as a Skewb, just to kind of get the feel for what it means. Swapping centers, the way that you'd swap centers here. Placing corners, the way that you place corners here, which are these guys. So, let's start off with what appears to be just a Skewb scramble. I'm going to turn this over here. Now in my Skewb scramble, I'm not doing any dyno moves. I'm only doing Skewb moves. And you can tell that it's working as such because the centers never leave being centers. And the corners never leave being corners. These, it doesn't matter. The rest of this side is derivative of other pieces. This is the only one that matters. So I could actually just go ahead and solve this as a Skewb, as a super Skewb, and what you have is a neat little shape, a neat little Skewb puzzle. But now we're going to do dyno cuts. So basically I scrambled it equivalent to this. These are all the same, these are the same. But to really get a challenge is I start to do dyno cuts. Just move this back over here. So this will be a dyno cut, and that's what I'm going to call this. These are all going to be Skewb cuts, Skewb turns. This will be a dyno turn. So we're going to continue to scramble it. Basically doing these dyno turns, I'm taking the centers away from each other. Turn, turn. Now watch closely as I'm doing this because the solve is pretty straightforward. The perspective can be confusing, but you can get through it. I'm going to continue doing this so as not to break tradition. Hocus pocus. Okay, so we now explore what appears to be a completely different thing, but let's see if we can solve this exactly like the F Skewb. So the first step in the F Skewb, if I were to do a point-by-point comparison with that, is remember I started off getting a side, you like the green side, I'm favorable to that, but I put these and lined them up with each other and then reduced these green edges. Well, in this case, I can't do it exactly like that because all of these are of one color, but notice that the corners are the ultimate calibrators. It's the same thing with this puzzle. These corners here never lose their position regarding each other. They may wander around the puzzle, but they're always going to be pretty well positioned. So too with these basically maintain their basic position. Like I say, they can move out, but you're really just sort of shuffling them around. What you want to do is just pick two of these small corners. These two small corners in the F Skewb represent the two non-reducible corners. That's what I'm going to start off with. Between them, what I'm going to do is reduce all the corners first, the large reducible Skewb corners first. In this case, it was the green, and I correlated which one goes here by seeing these two colors. Here, it's sort of like that. I'm going to start off with, say, green and silver. green and silver, and I'm going to put in this corner here, which represents this corner here. But I can't use these two to decide what color has to come here. I have to use, well, potentially this color to decide which ones belong between the green and the silver. Is it the white? Well, in order for the white to work, what's going to reveal it is that if the white has a little silver here, just like this red does, if white also has a little green one over here. What's more, it's also got to correlate with this color. So white, is it white or is it a different color that belongs here? So let's look at these other little whites and see if they correlate with these two colors. Now the thing I like about the solve is it does not require memorizing anything before the solve. To me, that's not really solving. If you've got to memorize the structure, and sometimes I have to do that, like with some of the higher order ghost cubes, potentially. But really, you shouldn't have to do that. Just pick up a scrambled puzzle and solve it. So here is a small white, and there's a green over here. So far so good. That can correlate with that. Now is there another white with, say, a silver? Here's a white with a silver, so we're also doing well. So white seems to fit. Does the white also have a yellow? So I have one more white to go. Let's find it, and we see it here, and no, it's an orange. What that tells me is that it's not the white that belongs here. Well, how about red? Red I already know has a silver. How about another red? Red here has a green, so that's pretty good. If the other red has a yellow, then we are good. And the answer is finding the other red right here, and it's a yellow. That tells me that's a match made in heaven. Keeping our perspective, and remember I'm putting this on one of the bottoms here, which correlates with, you know, one of the centers here. I'm going to put the red one in here because that seems to fit. So I'm going to do a Skewb move, which doesn't affect these guys, and just move the red one in. Upon doing that, I'm going to put these in the same way I put this in. And I'm going to use a combination of Dino moves and Skewb moves to set up and put it in. And remember, after I did that, I had to turn these back around. The good news with this, I don't. So here's the red and green. Get it over here. How am I going to do that? Well, we'll do a Dino move to get it out. Then a Skewb move to move it away. Then a Dino move to bring it to here. Then move this back with a Skewb move. It's not as hard as it sounds. It is pretty intuitive. You're just doing dinos and Skewbs. This is over here, but I actually want to get it over to here. So I'm going to do a Dino move to get it out. I want to move it into where this place is. So what I can do is do a Skewb move to bring it in this area. Dino move to bring it back, and then a Skewb move to bring this back. So what I have so far is the red and green is lined up fine. Now what about the red and silver or red and blue? Well, here's red and silver. This red and silver has to occupy this slot over here. Now there's no need to do algorithms. You can kind of intuit your way to it. Just remember, keep your perspective. So what I'm going to do to move this in, now every time I do a Skewb move I might offset edges here, but that's okay. I can get it back. So I'm going to Skewb it into here, which will take my corner away. I'm just going to do a Dino to move this in, then I can easily do a Skewb to bring it back. Alright, then we can take stock of what we've got. This is in and this is in. Remember, we're ignoring these. We're not reducing the centers yet. Lastly, I'm going to put the red that belongs next to this yellow. And that's over here. So again, Skewbs and Dinos to move it. Every time I do a Skewb, I'm going to maybe offset one of these corners, but I can Skewb it back when I'm done to be done with it. So do a Skewb to move it in place here, a Dino to move it in, and a Skewb to move it back. Alright, so good, good, good. The best way to really demonstrate is just kind of follow along and do it as I'm doing it. What I've really done is I have these two corners are already in, just like these two corners. Now this corner has been reduced, where this correlates with the proper corner here, this correlates with the proper corner here, and this correlates with the proper corner here, down here. Even the colors look similar. And this, well, that just guided me as to the internal structure of where that's supposed to be. Okay, the next step was to turn it around and to put in this part. Well, I already have a purple. Is purple a good candidate? Not really. Got a yellow here. Where does yellow come from? So not purple. How about white? Well, there is that white and green that we're talking about. Let's just scan around. Here's a white and gray. Well, okay, white and gray. Give me a white and orange and we are good. White and orange, yeah. So basically this belongs in here. So I'm just gonna move that in. It's not gonna offset anything else that I've done. This is all fine over here. So now that I have the white, this white and green is already there. Here's a white and gray that has to come into here. So we just find our way with Skewb moves and Dino moves. There's always going to be one Skewb move and one Dino move away from where you need it to be. So I'm just going to Skewb it over here. This is where it needs to be here. Dino it in here and Skewb it back. Believe it or not, what I'm doing is the same that I used to do with here when I would Skewb something in, Dino it in, Skewb it back. It's the same, exactly the same thing. It did take me a little while to skew my perspective, no pun intended, but there it is. So this is good, this is good. Again, ignore this. Now lastly, I put my white one here, white and orange. Find it around here somewhere. Now over here, this red one got knocked out. So I'm going to want to put this red one back in. So notice if I put this in here, it's going to Skewb this one out of the way. So I want to correlate these two with each other. So if I move this here and Skewb this in, this will come out. The way to fix that is I'm just going to pop this up here and coordinate it with this guy here. And then Skewb it down. Again, fairly intuitive, but it puts it in. Now the white, here's the white. How am I going to get this to here? Find a Skewb and find a Dino. Skewb it in to make a Dino cut, Dino it in, and always remember to Skewb things back. Well, in this case, we'll keep it here. So believe it or not, I've now done the equivalent of reducing these two along with this. All of these are fine. Don't worry about the centers, as I say. So this silver correlates with this silver, correlates with this red. This is all in. This correlates with this green. So this is all in over here. So this is the equivalent of this, this, and this, all correlated with these guys. Okay, now once you've done that, as you recall, the next step was to turn this upside down and first rotate these right and put these in. The good news with this is I'm once again going to turn it upside down, but I don't have to correlate these two with each other. It's already turned. And remember, there was one potential situation where this is rotated wrong. So I'd have to turn it up and then correlate that with this. You don't have to worry about that with this puzzle. So with that said, now we're going to try to get these corners here correlating with these corners here. So I'm going to look and first see, I see the purple here. Does the purple actually belong here? Well, purple and orange correlates with this. Here's purple and yellow, which correlates with this. And finally, purple and green, which correlates with this. So yes, and most of the time, that's what you're going to see. Purple is going to be fine. I only have one in, and I have the orange, which is over here. And I'm not going to turn it yet. As long as I just reduce this, we can work on turning it later if we need to. But I do know that with this orange here, and if this were over here, just below that is going to be the purple with green. So what I want to do is put the purple with green over here, so that when this turns back, this is here and this is here. So the purple with green is over here. So what I'm going to do is, in order to put this in, I'm going to have to do Dino moves. Doing those Dino moves will potentially offset this. Just like doing Dino moves here, when I put this in, will offset this over here. The way to get out of that is we're going to move it in with a Dino move, Skewb it, move it back, and Skewb it back again. So I want to get this green down to here, which correlates with a proper placement with this. So I'm going to take this, Dino it up, Skewb this into place here, Dino it back, and always remember to Skewb it back. So even though it's not correctly oriented with the center, that's okay. We're just trying to reduce this whole thing. This belongs here, this belongs here. Now what you're going to have in this situation is you're going to have two that are in and two that are in. One of them, the two that are in, are properly oriented with each other, these two. The other two are not properly oriented. So notice these two are flip-flopped, but that's what you want. That's exactly what you want. Because if you had two that were properly oriented and two that were properly oriented, you'd have to exchange one and one, and that's not possible. So this is what you want. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this, move this into the proper place here, and exchange it for the purple one. So where does this orange one go in correlation to here? Well, believe it or not, it really doesn't matter. Orange is going to be just below silver, and that's over here. So I want this blue and orange one to go over here, because this silver one is eventually going to come here, and this, which means that the one right next to it has to be the orange one. So this is going to come into here to be replaced by this. So what I'm going to do, again, keeping our perspective, we're going to skewb this in place, move this in its proper place over here, then we're going to skewb this back, and I'll replace this back. Upon doing that, you're going to find that everything is reduced. This is properly reduced. Now you see that these are not rotated correctly, but they are in the proper perspective. Yellow's here, followed by orange, so to yellow, orange, green, yellow, orange, green. So to here, yellow, gray, orange, yellow, gray, orange. So with that said, what I can do is try to rotate these in the proper position. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually try to get these correct. These are correct over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to rotate these corners where they should be. Now, in terms of rotating the corners appropriately, remember that when we rotated corners here, we had a way of doing it to where if on a normal Skewb I wanted to rotate this, say, clockwise, what I would do is I would go down, down, up, up. So I'd flip-flop this. I move it down and up. And when I did that, depending on if I started this way, which rotated counterclockwise, or this way with a clockwise rotation, that would cause a differential rotation here. So let's say I rotated starting this going clockwise, and I swapped these two going down, down, up, up. Then I did it again to swap it back, down, down, up, up. By doing a clockwise rotation, this basically started blue here, rather the green was here. This rotated like this. This rotated counterclockwise. So doing a clockwise rotation rotated this counterclockwise if I just did that set once of down, down, up, up. So if I wanted to rotate this clockwise, then I would have to turn this counterclockwise starting off. So down, down, up, up, down, down, up, up. So in a regular Skewb, I would turn it the opposite to cause rotation here. So basically, with this puzzle, let's say that's what I want. That's what I want to do. Understand, my centers are here. This is going to be my down, down, up, up, and I'm going to be rotating about this axis and this axis. Just like here, I rotated about this axis and this axis. Should you ever get confused, this and this, these are the corners that I'm rotating with. What I want to do is I would like to rotate this puzzle from here to here counterclockwise. So because of that, I'm going to turn this counterclockwise 4 times and go down, down, up, up, do it again, down, down, up, up. And as you can see, this is now rotated correctly. So that's a kind of a typical Skewb technique, and this will automatically rotate correctly as well. So basically what you have is you have all the corners reduced perfectly fine. And you can tell because you have this kind of danger sign here. This corner is reduced, but it's actually in line with all the rest of these corners. Now every so often you're going to get a situation like this. So what's different here? Well, everything is in here, but you notice this one here, it's not rotated right. Everything else is. This is green, this is yellow, this is orange, and just to review, you've got the bottom corners here reduced, these 2 bottom corners reduced. Now you're trying to reduce these 2 corners. You felt like you got it reduced, and you did. This was all fine. These are in the correct position relative to each other. Silver, orange, yellow, silver, orange, yellow, but this is rotated. This one is not rotated, it's just fine, but you have one that's rotated. This is the equivalent in this puzzle to everything being in but this being rotated 90 degrees. So too, this is rotated 90 degrees, and you might end up with a situation like that. If you get a situation like that, I'm going to solve it, or I'm going to deal with it the same way that I dealt with this. I'm basically going to say that this needs to come to here. This needs to be where this is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this up, which takes this out of alignment for the moment, but that's okay. And then I'm going to take this and put it over here. Take this and put it where it's supposed to be. And the simple algorithm that I'm going to use is, let's say this is an R, and the R is a dyno cut. And we'll say this is an R, and this is a U. U is a Skewb cut. So I'll go like RI, U, R, U, RI, U, R, and that's it. And that'll rotate these around. So it's a pretty simple thing. Basically all I did when designing that algorithm is I just took this and moved it here by sailing it around. So it's a very quick RIU, RU, RIU, RU. But in any case, it'll land you the same way. So take a look at that closely, stop now if you need to, and work on reducing your corners. All you have to do is reduce 4 corners. It's not too difficult once you get the hang of it. These are already reduced, and it's the same thing as reducing this corner, this corner, this corner, and this corner.